Hey, if you're joining me, leave me a thumbs up so I know that you can hear me. And we'll probably get started about 7:05, so this is a good chance for any last bathroom breaks or to get your water for washing your brushes out. Just doing a quick volume check. I did tweak something, so I'm hoping that'll help people be able to hear me. So Veda, can you hear me any better than before? Veda, how does the audio sound tonight? About the same. Okay. Oh, I can cut it up, but I'm kind of afraid to blow your eardrums out. I don't know if that's any better or not. Okay. Thanks, Miss Wendy. All right. Yeah, we'll get started here about 7:05. We've got I know of at least one other person, one other viewer that has purchased access tonight. So we'll at least wait until hopefully we can get 3 in here by 7:05. If not, we'll just get started. So y'all have your paper towels and your water ready to go. Can y'all read the writing on the tubes? I want to make sure everything's in focus good for you. It looks a little blurry on my screen, but I can't tell if that's just my screen. Might be a little bit blurry. Let's see. Okay, that's about as clear as it's going to get. Is it not the best? Yeah, just slightly blurry. Hopefully, I mean, it won't really matter too much with the owl because he's nice and big. It might matter more if we were doing buildings or something. As long as it doesn't make you seasick or make your head hurt or anything like that. Probably should get a different camera, but this thing's so convenient. All right, we got 3 in here. If you're just now joining us, give me a thumbs up so I know you can hear me and you're ready to go. And we'll get started here about 7:05. Just giving everybody a chance to settle. shadow. And just a word about tonight's painting. We really won't be using the small brush too much, except on the eye and on some of the nose with like highlights and things. But we will need the smaller brush for details. So just make sure that you have, and I apologize if there's any kind of technical difficulty. It was storming earlier today and it was really bad. So if I lose power for some reason, if they're working on the lines, even though I haven't lost power all day, it would happen now. I apologize, and I'll either try and finish up the recording, or refund money or whatever we need to do on that, or reschedule for a different day. We'll see what happens, but hopefully we won't have any problems. But yeah, so bigger, smaller brush. Tonight I'm actually using a synthetic brush. I usually use the hog bristle, and I did in my demonstration one, but I thought I'd change it up a little bit tonight and use the synthetic. Sometimes you get a little smoother, so that's why it looks a little bit different. And then these paints that I have are not my favorite. I got these off of Amazon, and they were pretty cheap. And they're just kind of like a medium body acrylic paint. Honestly, if you ever get acrylic paint, you should get bigger tubes than this, especially if you use them like I do. But because I can go through about a tube of painting, especially if you like to work with thicker paint. So just a word about that. And make sure you have a palette. I'm actually just using a lid off of a cottage cheese container. Very fancy, but it works. And I like doing it on plastic because you can peel it off after it's dried, and you don't have to worry about dirtying anything up or scraping or anything like that. So that's what I'm using tonight. I've got my 11 by 14 canvas. We've lost somebody. Uh-oh. Hopefully they're not having power. Okay, they're back. They're back. All right, everybody thumbs up. We good to go? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go on and get started. Like I said, if you lose me at all tonight, this video will be up. I don't even know when it actually goes down, because I think my other ones are still up. You just have to pay to actually watch it. So, yeah, so they stay up, especially if you've already paid for access. So even if you miss something tonight, you can go back and watch it. Or if you want to look for pointers or anything like that. I am working vertically on the canvas. Unfortunately, this document viewer only shows like the top half of the canvas, which is not ideal, but that's what I'm working with. So, as we are focusing on different areas, I'll scooch it around. If I zoom out any further, it really won't make much of a difference, because this thing's this horizontal orientation, and it only goes out so far. So that's the deal with that. Make sure you all have your water for rinsing your brushes out. That's always important, and your paper towels or a rag. Some people like rags. I don't, but anyway. Okay. First thing we are going to do for our owl, because when you're starting with a white canvas, it's always nice to start with putting a little bit of color on it. And you know what? If you've taken a class with me, I like to call it laying the groundwork. But for this, we're not even going to start with that. We're actually going to start with doing some, not even outlining for this one. I would consider it more like mapping. So for this owl, we're like mapping out our different areas of our owl, kind of our different sections. It's not even color blocking because our owl is literally just black and white with the orange eye. So you can't even consider it color blocking. But, I'm going to call it mapping. So we're going to start with some black to map out our owl areas here. And we're actually going to start, which is a little rare for my classes, but we're actually going to start with black and the small brush. So completely different than what I usually do, because I usually wait for black till the end. But when we're dealing with such few colors here, black is just an integral part of this beautiful striking owl. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to use our small brush and a little bit of black, and we're going to map out some areas here for our owl. If y'all have any questions or anything, or need me to slow down or repeat something, please type it in the comments. I can't hear your voices, unfortunately. So just type it in the comments, and that way, it's right here in front of me. I can see, anything you put up here. So we are going to start by doing a very strange, like, half V. And this is like the upper forehead of our owl. So that's what we're going to do. And this owl, his forehead you may have different size canvas than me. So, judge your proportions accordingly, depending on, your canvas size. But for me, having done this owl before, his forehead is about halfway down your canvas, if that helps you at all. So you start off with the V, and on this side he kind of comes over about 3/4 of the way. So you can mark it if you want to, if you're judging, and just kind of mark a little spot if you want to, and that way, if you're a little nervous about just going gung-ho into it. I'm gonna move my brush here for a minute. Gung-ho into it. If that makes you feel better, you can. So I'm just gonna start like that. And then we're going to start with, actually I'm going to bring mine in a little bit. I think I went too wide. Doing our V. So we're doing a curvy V for his forehead here. And like I said, we're just mapping out some of these areas that we will come back to. See, and I didn't even go to my mark, but that's okay. He's a pretty forgiving owl. And the good thing, like I always say with acrylics, is if you don't like something, you can paint over it. So right now we're just mapping. And if I need to adjust this at all, I can. But this is just kind of a rough outline of what he will be. Our next section we're going to map out here is the bottom part of his face. And I'm going to scooch this up so you can see. So the bottom, like, third of your canvas. And this is where his cheek swoops in, and then it kind of comes into the beak. So that's what we're doing, and it's kind of an S shape. So I'm starting, like I said, it's about the bottom 1/8 or so, just making an S shape. Let me make sure y'all can see that okay. I've got a bit of a lag on my video. Just doing the S shape here. And this will come into his beak here. So nice S shape. Doesn't have to be perfect. And it's going to come into his beak here. And if you're looking, you kind of want the bottom of your curved V to be lined up with the beak as best you can, because that's kind of the middle of his face. And we are splitting his face up quite a bit, but I still got to keep things lined up pretty well here. And yes, he does not look much like an owl right now, but he's just an outline. So that's what we're going to do with that. And that'll really help us when we're coming back in with our different layers of grays and whites and black region. And that'll help us with Mr. Owl here. So that's the first step of that. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to rinse our brushes out and make sure that it is good and dried off after you get that black, because we're going to go ahead and put in the circle for his eye with orange. And this is laying some groundwork here. And what this orange circle is going to do is kind of create a boundary for us. So that way when we're filling in, since the orange, we want it to stay as clear as possible. So we don't want any white to make it less vivid or any black to make it muddy. You know, we want it as orange as possible. So this way we know where our eye is going to be roughly, and you won't accidentally get into it with a color that's going to mess up your eye. And by the time we come back to the eye, the orange will be dried and it's not going to be an issue to come back over it. So our eye comes kind of the lower section of our curved V here. And it's a pretty large eye. So, I mean, it takes up quite a bit here. So I'm going to make mine, I'm probably going to overestimate how large my eye is going to be for now. And then it might change. We can always come back in, especially since it's got a black outline, and kind of adjust the sizing of it. We're going to do our owl eye here. And if you want to do it just a circle, you can. I'm kind of going to go on and do kind of a flattened semicircle on top, so it's not quite super round. And then it's got a pretty round base here. And if you want to go on and fill it in, you can. I think I will, just because that way it can be a nice base work. And also when we're coming back in with our orange, I'm still with my little brush, but you could have done this with the big one. I just wasn't thinking about it. But I'm going to fill this in with orange. And when we come back to this, this will be dried and it'll be a nice base. So we shouldn't have any problems with any see-through paint, especially if you're working with a thinner paint. It's a good idea to go on and fill this in. I'm going to bring this down a little bit more here. And like I said, this may be over-exaggerating the size of this eye. But it's better to have too much space prepped than not enough. So, just going to get it nice and filled in there. Okay, so we've got that much. I'm going to rinse out the orange. And if you want to, you can go on and do an outline of your beak to kind of keep it like roughly the shape that it's going to be. I don't know if you can see here, but I guess I'll do that too. So just getting a little bit more black on your brush. We could have done it when we had the black on here before, but it's not a huge deal. You can do it or not. And we're just going to make our beak outline here. So it's kind of like a reverse curvy V here. And then it comes up and curves like that. And then he comes back down like that. Kind of a curvy, like a full V, or even you can call it a U. A U with fancy sides. See, and already he's starting to look more like an owl than when we started. So that's how you don't get overwhelmed with paintings. It helps to just kind of break them down into sections, into shapes, into different like letters or movements or anything that helps you see it in its parts. So as long as you're breaking it down into its parts, it is much more easier to, it's easier to see it as a sum of its parts than to see the bigger picture, because if you work part by part, it'll come together as a whole. So we're actually going to go to our big brush now. That's what we're going to do here. And we're going to get some more black. So we're going to get our black here. And we're going to fill in this upper right section here. We're going to fill in this whole corner with black. And the reason we're doing this is laying that groundwork. We, since we're working with wet on wet through a lot of this, it's important to put certain things down in certain orders. And that way, when we come back to this, it'll be dry and it'll be easier to put our highlights onto it. So that's why we're going to go on and paint this. So it has time. I'm sorry, I bumped the camera. So it has time to dry. That way, by the time we get back to it, it'll be easier to work with. Okay. Another reason I switched to this synthetic brush is because this paint, scan out a little bit, or try. Let me see, Miss Wendy. Let me see how far I can get back here. Sorry, Winnie, that's as far out as it goes because of the horizontal viewfinder here. So if there's a section that you're needing to see, like I can push it up like that if you need to see the beak or anything. So, and unfortunately, if I turn the viewfinder vertically, it flips the entire picture. So I don't think you want to work upside down on this. So, but like I said, we're just working section by section right now. So I'll move it to where we're working on, and hopefully that'll help you out a little bit. So let me finish filling this in. And while we're filling in, we're going to go on and fill in this beak here too, because it's all black. Well, I mean, technically it's gray, but you know. So I'm filling in this beak now. And you got to admit, it looks like a bird already. And see, my beak is a little bit fat down here, but we're going to paint over top of this a little bit, and I'll be able to cinch it in. So that's fine. And yours, depending on the size of your canvas, may be smaller or larger. But, you know, a lot of that just depends on your canvas. Yeah, I wish I could scan out so you can see the entire thing. If I did it Bob Ross style, it would, it's a little more difficult to see up close, so that's why I like to use the document viewer. Okay. So, we are done filling in here. So we're going to go on and rinse our brush out. Hopefully my rinsing of my brush is not too loud for you because it's kind of right by my microphone. So make sure it's nice and dry because we're going to go to white next. You know, that's the beauty of working with so few colors. You don't have to worry about mixing in general. You don't have to worry about, you know, getting something on here, or it's, some people might see it as limiting, but I really like working in black and white. All right, we're going to white. We're still with our big brush, and you're going to need quite a bit of white because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fill in with some of our white as a base coat that we're going to work with. And this will make putting the black in for our feathers, our different layers of feathers, much easier, because we'll be working wet paint into wet paint, and so it'll blend a little bit, and it'll be much easier to work with. So this is going to seem like a lot of white, but he's a white owl, so I guess that's what we're going to do here. We're going to fill in pretty much this whole face. This whole face, if you can see that, with white here. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stick this over here so I can see. I'm more in time. Yeah, that'll work. I can see I don't have a lag if I move my video over a little bit. Okay. So we're going to fill in here. This face is very interesting because he kind of has this nice circle of feathers, like this nice circle pattern going around his face, just kind of framing it. So when I'm putting the white in, try and avoid the orange eye. You can leave a bit of a gap, like an imaginary line around your eye, because we're going to outline it with black anyway. So it's better not to risk getting orange in with your white, because if you get orange in with your white, let's say you do, you're going to want to wait until your paint dries and go back over it with the clean white, because that orange is, that's that's a downside of working with so few colors, is it's not as forgiving. So if you do get orange in with your white, just let the smear or whatever you've done dry, and then go back over it with white. Okay. So I'm coming around this eye. The eye is kind of our focal point here for this owl, and all his feathers seem to kind of come around this eye here. So in this nice circle. And it's okay if you go over your outline a little bit, because it's just an outline. I mean, that's all it is. It's our mapping here. So it's not going to stay like that forever. So we're filling in here with our white. And you want it pretty wet, so get you quite a bit on there. Because the next thing we do, we're going to want this white to still be wet. Okay? So even up here it doesn't matter quite so much, because this is a darker area up near the top. But still avoid that eye. Pretty wet. And how you know you have enough paint on here, you want your brush to be able to glide on your canvas smoothly, and that's a good indicator that you have enough paint on here. If you get too much friction where it kind of feels like sandpaper under your brush, that means that you don't have enough paint. So this next part will not work if you don't have enough paint on your canvas. Okay. So we got all this white on here. What on earth are we doing? I'll show you. The next thing we're going to do, I'm not washing out my brush yet. You'll notice, especially if you take classes with me, I try and hold off washing my brush as long as possible, because I don't like the extra water on there, or like the possibility of outside colors getting in on the brush. But so I'm leaving my white on. You're welcome to rinse your brush if that bothers you. But I like to leave paint on my brush, especially if I still have quite a bit, because it gunks up my water really fast. And especially if we're about to mix some colors in here, it doesn't matter. So for this next part, we're going to get some black. And what we're going to do, get some black here. We're actually going to start dark to light on this section, because this black's going to come off pretty thick at first. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to come up here where our V starts, and we're going to start putting our line. The owl has this really nice line kind of bordering this section of the V here. Scooch on down so you can see. And this kind of makes his eyebrow here. So it comes down right above his eye, and then it's like a little eyebrow. So making his little eyebrow here. And then you can kind of fill it in a little bit with a little bit of dabby marks if you want to. All the feathers in here are going to end up being these kind of zigzaggy brush strokes, I guess you'd call them here. And it's okay if it's not perfect. We'll come back with the smaller brush and give more definition to things. So I need more black. Okay. All right. So that's what you're going to do. And then we can also start making our circles around Mr. Owl here. So again, I'm going to take a little more black, and this black's going to come off pretty strong. So that's why I'm starting in the darker region here, because with these colors, it's not super forgiving. So we're going to leave some of this white showing, but we want this black to mix in with our white. So we end up with some gray, because our owl has a lot of different variations. It's got, gray, it's got black, it's got white. So we want those differences in colors, since we're only working with black and white. So we're going to start, like I said, he's got this nice pretty face mask, if you will, kind of this nice circly, almost like a raccoon circle going on here around his face, around this eye focal point. So we're going to start, and when we're doing his feathers, you want to do it like you're doing stripes, except we're going to be doing stripes in a circle. So that's what we're doing. So we're just taking our big brush, and we're doing this circle here with stripes. Okay, so that's why I'm starting up here, because I'm going to have more of this black on my brush, like that. And then it comes off, mine comes off page a little bit here. And then we're going to keep doing it. I'm going to actually get a little more black. And my white's already drying because I hate this paint. That's okay though, I'll just add more white. So bringing in some of this black. And it follows this nice S that we drew down here. Keeps going along here. And then it kind of gets smaller, because it's going to go away when you get down to his cheek. So there is our first little circle around his face here. So that's our first circle of feathers. And you may see me put a little bit of white in here. It's because my paint's drying so fast. You may not need to do that depending on what kind of paint you're working with. But this paint, I've noticed, tends to dry really fast. So we just work with what we got. So yeah, I'm actually putting some white in here because this is not going to mix up here. So I'm going to finish this corner up here with some more of our stripies, and you may need a little more black. I'm probably going to need a little more black. Mine's probably going to look a little bit different because, like I said, I have to put more white in mine. So we're doing another circle, and these circles are about an inch or so apart. There's not really any exactness to it, except that they are a circle. So that's what we're doing there. And now we're going to come back in with some more white because this is getting too dark up in here. And we need some more white to kind of soften this out and blend in some gray. If you want to mix gray on your palette and come back in that way, you're welcome to. I like mixing as much paint on my canvas as possible, especially when I'm working wet on wet. But, you know, if you have a different way of doing it, you do that. So I'm filling in the sections here, the in-between, with some white. And it kind of covered up see my paint's drying so fast. So I'm going to have to come back in with my black again. See how I covered it up a little bit? I just want a little more definition. That's why I'm going to come back in with this black. Yours may look completely different. I have no idea. But mine was definitely too dry. So I'm coming back in with some more black. We're still doing our circle around the eye. And he just makes a really nice circle around here, especially since we're doing such a light owl, this white owl. We're probably going to need quite a bit of white in here. Might make it too dark. Maybe not that. And unfortunately, all my white has dried, so I'm actually switching to a different white because this little tube, like I said, these little tubes, they don't last much. So I'm switching to a different. I still have a cup left over from another class. I just have to get some yellow out of it because I don't want yellow in this owl. Or blue. It's got blue in it too. Okay. So you may not have the same problem that I'm having with that. So we're going to get more white on our brush, and you should still have some of that dark on there from where we did our stripies. So we're going to keep doing our circle with more white, and we're letting some of that black shine through. So we're just doing big stripes here because this owl is all about layers, layers of feather and layers of light and dark. And this one you can actually do a little more stripe over towards your beak area here. Like that. We're just filling it in with that kind of grayish white, depending on how light your owl got. He's still got his circle going on here. And his circle kind of comes, like his circle diameter is about like here. Everything above the nose tends to go towards the nose. If there's too much of a glare, let me know, because it looks pretty bright on my end. So that's what we're doing. We're just coming in here, filling in with some white, and see, you can see this difference. Hold on, let me darken this a little bit. Can you see the difference here? The different layers. We're just making circle stripes around his eye. We're even going to come up under this little eyebrow, and you can go on and do a little bit there if you want to, or you can wait for the smaller brush. And he tends to get whiter the closer towards the eye. So you want to be to pretty much clean white by the time you get to his eye here. If you see a little bit of blue in my white, it's because I'm using a paint from a different time, and apparently there's a little bit of blue in here. So that's interesting. So he's got this nice circle around his eye. And you can go on too if you want to do some of these. This is still part of the circle, but it's kind of going along that S curve here. I'm just doing more of those stripies. And everyone's is going to turn out a little bit different depending on how their paint was laying. Let's see, you're just making that circle, the stripies. And mine got too dark up here. So if you want to put some more white up here, mine got way too dark up here. It's going to turn into a gray owl. So I'm adding some more white back up in here where it got too dark when I was running out of white paint. It's always fun. There. Here's some more of those stripies. I'm just putting those stripies back where I covered. There, a little lighter there. Okay. So that's what we have so far. Definitely looking more like an owl. While we have our gray on our brush from doing our stripes and our whites, we can go on and we can do, I'm just going to go on, we can go on and fill in above the nose. So where we have our circle here, this kind of deviates from the circle because it kind of starts following this middle section more than it's following the circle. Right here at his nose. And I actually lowered this actually needs to come down a little bit more, but that's okay, I'll fix it. If you hear the wind outside, it's pretty strong. So I'm just filling in here. You can fill in here. And this part does not, these are kind of vertical, no, horizontal stripes here that are kind of perpendicular to our circle. So this is outside of our circle diameter here. All right, we've got our white and we've got our gray. So it's time to do some of the splotchy design here on his forehead. Hope everybody's doing okay. Okay. So what I like to do when I was doing this, is to do a U like that. So we're going to make U's. Kind of like, remember when we used to do mermaid scales, fish scales and things. And they get smaller as you get down here and closer together. Like this. Closer and smaller. I'm still just using that leftover paint from doing my circle. If you hear my son, he's at the door. Oh, the beak. Veda needs the beak. There's the beak. We haven't really filled in the beak yet with the gray tones or highlights or anything, so it's still black. But while I'm doing these, I don't want them to dry too fast, Veda, so I'm going to keep doing this. So we're keep doing our U's here. And you don't want them lined up perfectly, so you can kind of space them gradually. And they get bigger as they get up further on his head. And then what we're going to do with these U's is we're going to take our big brush and we are going to pull them. So we're pulling that paint upwards, and that's going to make kind of feather texture here. So they're not fish scales anymore. They're more like feathers. That. So not even any paint on my brush. I'm literally just pulling what's here. And then they get smaller as you go down. Doing more up here. So, got my splotches. And then we're going to get some more of our white. And we're still working in this top area up here. So we're going to do some more of our stripes, except these kind of look like wheat. So these are kind of more plant-like. We're going to follow this line of our curvy V. So we're going to start here at the bottom, and we're going to do stripes, except we're doing vertical stripes with our white. And we're literally just outlining that side of our U, of our curvy V here. And then it comes down and it blends back in with those horizontal lines down there. And I'm going back in. I lost some of my dark. You can tell it's kind of gotten a little muddy here. So I'm going to come back in. Yours may have done the same. I'm bringing that black. Remember we had come back and we had done this black section here that outlines. So I'm coming back with that. Our eyebrow, that's what he was. He was an eyebrow. And the eyebrow still comes here. And the eyebrow, I'm going to go on and bring him down a little bit because he actually does cross our eye here. And then he kind of disappears down here. I lost a little bit of that. So if you have that problem, and then I go back and You can mess this up again. So it never should have gotten messed up to begin with like that. Shame. It's like I got my little vertical stripes that got lost. Okay. So now, after you finish with your gray, we're going to go back to our clean white, okay? So rinse your brush out because, like I said, we're going to go back to clean white. Why is that not changing here? That should change. That's weird. Huh. All right, rinsing a brush good because we're going back to our clean white. And if you need to see it here, does that help? Yeah, not the greatest. There might be a little bit of an angle there if I leave it like that, but at least you can see more of it. Yeah, you can see more of it that way. Definitely looking like an owl. He is all about the layers. Okay. Hopefully I got most of the black out. A good way to check to see if you've got the black out of your brush is to rub it on your paper towel. And you should be able to see if there's any paint in there or not. And for this part, I'm actually going to go back to my tube of paint because what I have left is pretty muddled. So I'm going to go back to my white here. Because like I said, you want this part of the owl, this part we're about to do down here is pretty white. It's pretty white. Still with the big brush. And we're going to fill in this section down here, if everyone's ready, with white. So all of this is going to be white. Where's that tube? There it is. I'm just going to squirt my tube on here. Because I'm going to need quite a bit, and this tube is so small. Okay. On that. I got a little on his beak, but that's okay. All right. All of that is white. Okay. And this is a really interesting part of his face because he has this nice, like we had our layers up here that are kind of going around our eye. And down here, he has this weird little strip of white, like an inch or so of white below his headline, I guess you'll call it. So we're going to leave about an inch of that, come down an inch, going back with our black. And this part of the owl is where he gets kind of his spotty look. So we're going to do little patches of black. And they're going to be around his collar. We'll call it his collar. So we're just going to start with little splotches here. And they kind of curve a little bit. And he's got this nice, it's following that S pattern again. He's got this beautiful breast, I guess, neck collar. And then what you want to do here is let some of that white mix in with some of that black. Let me get back to this other one, because we need some of the gray. And we're going to fill in here with more stripes. But make sure they're pretty faint, because these white spots really need to shine out. So we're just putting them on either side of our, it's kind of like a little pattern. You've got like 2 little dabs, 2 little stripies, and then a black spot. So 2 little stripies and the black spot. And this one can actually keep going. And you can fill in down here too if you've got extra. Just more of those layers. And while we have this light gray, we're doing more lines, because he's got some lines up in this collar region. And these follow that S curve here. And they're kind of like the dashes that we did up here, except these are much more straight and thinner. So it's just more like lines. We're just making some lines here. And you can do some down here. And it kind of follows his collar. And I accidentally got too, I touched my black. I'm filling back here. See, because you want this black. If the black spots go away for you for some reason, if they get muddled in somehow, we can just go back in and add them back in. But they're pretty important, because they really are important to his pattern. See, I got too much black there. It happens. Just more of my white here. Fixing what I did. I think I hear my cat at the door. He's not supposed to be up here. And it just follows that. See, that's one reason we did the S pattern. So it gives you a nice guideline. Like I said, we're mapping it out. There was a reason for it all. You keep that S pattern in there. So if you can see that. And when we were doing our circle here, you might have lost some of this outlining with the black around his head. So if you're like me, I'm going to put mine back in. And I'm going to keep, you see, I haven't washed my brush outs because, I mean, there's no reason to. Not really. Unless your brush gets too gross. But I'm fixing this stripe here along his head. And you can kind of make it brush over his collar more. And remember, it kind of just goes away. But it's still that stripe that goes all the way around. Okay. And after all that, we finally have our base texture going. We can finally rinse out our big brush. And then when y'all are ready, we'll go to the smaller brush. And we've got more to do here. He's definitely looking like an owl, though. sure anybody would be able to see an owl out of that, even without his piercing eye. And the next thing we're going to work on is his beak. So I'm going to give y'all a second to finish up with your big brush. And then we will go on with his beak. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to tap that. Okay. All right, I'm going to go on with his beak. If anybody needs another second with their big brush, just put me a little stop sign or a woo kind of. Okay, I see no objections. I'm going on. Okay, here it goes. All right, we are back to our small brush. It's been a while. And we're going to get some black. And we've got to fill in this beak again. So we got to redefine our beak here. And the beak, he kind of comes down a little bit. May have to fix the shape of mine a little bit, but that's his lip. Kind of makes a diagonal off branch lump, whatever you want to call it, off of his beak here. My beak definitely got girthy. So I'm probably going to fix that. But for right now, I'm filling in with black. Because we're going to want this to be a little bit wet for when we are putting our shading in here. Actually, I ended with mine a little more in, but he does have a kind of a symmetrical piece off of here. I'm just going to fill that in. Okay. So we're getting a little bit of our white now that we have this filled in. And we're not going to put that stark white highlight yet. We're going to mix a little of the black that's still on our brush with some of our white until we get this nice gray, which we should be used to working with gray by now. And we're going to put his little mouth in. And his mouth follows the line of this narrow V or U, whatever you want to call it. Follows that line. Mine got a little too faint. Add a little more white in there so you can see it better. So it follows that line. Just like that. And then you can get some more of your white. And he's got two little stripies, little highlights on his lip, kind of parallel to each other. But you want to leave some of that black showing in between. We're still with this gray. We're going to fill in this middle section of his beak. This is where our highlight is. And it's kind of like a really narrow triangle, So we're going to start pretty broad up here in the middle. And then as we go down, we're going to get more narrow until he's got more of a fine point here. Like that. So you want black on either side of your triangle. I'll make it a little lighter so you can see, in case it's hard to see there, because it is a little harder with these cameras and you don't really get super definition on these things. So if you see, I've got a narrow, kind of like a carrot on his nose, and then on either side I've got black. And then you can go on and do your highlight. So you get your big glob of white, and you can go on and put the highlight right down the middle here. And it's okay if it's pretty globby because it's a highlight. Like that. You can put a little highlight on his little mouth here too if you want to. And now I'm going to come back in. We got another little white spot we haven't done yet. We're going to do his nostril. So where we've left some white here, we're just going to put a circle. And if you have a fine brush, it's best to do it with a finer brush than what I'm using. But I'm just going to use this one for now. So we're just kind of outlining some of the black that's left here. And if you ended up with a broader beak like mine did, you may want to go on and put a little bit over here, a little symmetrical nostril for him. Because my beak ended up broader. I squished him in further. I'm going to fix my black here because he got out of sorts a little bit. And I'll probably come back in with some white and kind of shape him up a little bit. Mine kind of got a little wide here, but I'm not going to worry about that right now for time's sake. It's a beak. He's got highlights. I'll leave it up there because I know that's a little tedious. And before we work on this eye, which this orange should be nice and dry, we are going to go on and do a little more definition around with our gray. A little more finer layers than we did with our larger brush. And it'll shape up really nice. So what I'm doing now is I'm making sure I have a pretty good amount of white on my brush. You don't want very much black, but you want a pretty light gray. And we're just going to shape up around this eye a little bit. So I'm working some of these layers up near the eyebrow. Just doing some more of those stripies. And you can kind of get closer to your eye now because we're going to start filling in and shaping it up a little bit. So we're doing our stripies, doing some eyebrow definition on this dude. He needs a little eyebrow work. And it's mostly white. So we're just adding some finer layers from our big layers, our little circles that we did. And it'll really make a difference. It just kind of makes everything pop a little bit. And I'm still with my white on here. And you can add some more stripes along here. And like I said, it just gives a different texture, a little more definition on here. Here, I'll see if you can see that good, that light. Just kidding. A little bit. Let's see here. No, I don't like that. There. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to throw you off. Just trying to let you see those layers, and I can't tell if my light's blowing it out too much. So doing some of the finer stripes along here. With your white. And it just gives you some more depth, more layers here. Especially if you got a little muddy up around his eye, you can fill back in here with some white. Mine got a little dark. So I'm just kind of filling in with some white here. Lightening up this eye a little bit. Coming back through, we're going to come back through here and we're going to add in more of our little stripes. These are our little horizontal stripes here. And it's probably a little dry, but that's okay. So using our white. And you can make some little feathers overlapping onto your beak. It messes it up a little bit, gives you a little bit of texture. Helps you hide some things. So that's all we're doing right now. We're just adding some texture here. Some stripes where that circle came in here. Yep. Then you can do some around your circle. And then I'm going to take some more of this white. Zoom that out a little bit so you can see. And right here, I'm just where it's overlapping the collar, just doing a little bit of feather texture to cover up any lines that are still showing, any bare paint that you might have. It just kind of helps integrate everything and gives you a really nice texture. I'm going to definitely fix this poor little fat nose here. This little fat beak. I'm going to fix mine. Wasn't going to, but it bothers me. So I'm going to smooth them out a little bit. There, that's a little better. That's okay. And you can do some more texture. Little feather texture here. And it helps blend everything in. So you're not ending up with super stripes. And he'd be like a little zebra owl or something. You can also, we're going to take our white too. And we're going to highlight we're going to go back and do our U's again up here. Because where we pushed our paint up, it just kind of makes everything gray. And adding that little pop of white really helps it stand out. So wherever you had one of your little U's, we're just adding a dab of that white here. And that'll help those stand out. You can mess them up a little bit, like a little feather texture. You don't want them super stripy. It's just a highlight. Just because it's a highlight doesn't mean it's a line, especially on a messy owl. All right. You can come back here. You can put some more white wherever you think you need some more texture, or more like to lighten anything. Like, you know, up here, you may think it may need a little more striping or something. You know, that's really just your call. However yours is shaping up. Especially if you see a spot that has some blank canvas or like looks a little rough. This is a good thing to kind of come back in, and it helps, like I said, it helps blend everything kind of back in and integrates everything. Gives some nice texture. Little stripies. Messy stripes. Feather stripes. And then, believe it or not, maybe we can actually do this eyeball that we've been neglecting this whole time. So we're going to work on this eyeball, and then, believe it or not, we'll be done, and you will have painted a beautiful owl. But we got to focus on this eye, because he looks a little sad and a little bit creepy without his eye. I mean, owls look creepy anyway with their big old eyes. He looks super creepy. So we're going to come in with our black here, because we've got to do our outline for our eye. And this is where you can shape up your eye however you want to, depending on how big you made it, how big you want it to be. I'm actually going to switch to a different black because mine's already drying up, believe it or not. All right. Black paint is black paint though. Okay. So we're going to shape up our eye here. You want the middle section. If you want to go on and draw your circle, the outline, honestly, I would go on and do a little bit of your outline, and that'll help you shape up where your eyeball is going to be. Because this outline is like 1/4 of an inch thick. So you want to kind of outline your circle that you've done. And that'll kind of help you make your parameters for your eyeball without messing up your orange. Okay. And then you can fill in your outline here. His mascara, I guess you call it his eyeliner, his mascara here. This is really nice to do with a small flathead brush, especially something like this where you, like mine for instance, is about 1/4 of an inch wide, and it's flathead, so you get really nice lines. It's really easy to get the thickness there, and I don't have to work as hard at it as if I were doing like a smaller brush or something like that. We're just filling in here. It's like the most meticulous part. That's why I hate doing it. I was like, I'm going to wait for the last thing to do this because it's annoying. And this part of the eye actually kind of gets flattened by this part that's swooping in. And it's okay. You know, I've got some extra orange around the outside, and that's what I was talking about. I made my eye too big because it's I can just bring some white in here and clean it up. And while we're doing our black, we've got our outline. You can go on and do your pupil because you're going to want your pupil to be as dry as possible before you do that final white highlight on his eye, because if not, it will be mud. And of course, owls have huge pupils. Big old circle here. But it seems to be like it's on the upper half of his eyeball. And it's not a perfect circle, so you don't have to worry about it being a perfect circle. To me, cat pupils are very tricky because they have that very specific slit in them, especially if they're, contracted, their pupils. So those are really tricky to me. I'd much rather have a nice wide owl eyeball to paint here. And you want it to be pretty close to the top, but don't let it touch. You want a nice line between them there. Trying to decide. That's the hardest thing, is trying to decide how big is big. Actually, I may make it a little bit longer. There. It's another example of the flathead brush being helpful. I got my nice owl eye there. I don't need more black. And I don't know about y'all, but I need to fix mine a little bit. So I'll probably wait until it's dry to come around and fix where I've got too much of an outline and that orange showing. Right now, if I did it, it would mix with that black, and it would be, since there's so much white at the eye, it would get a little messy. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. What we can do is we can go on and get some white with our small brush and do some of the, there's a really fine line, a nice outline highlight of it's not an eyelid because owls don't have eyelids, the eye socket, I guess we'll call it. So especially while this black is wet, because it'll soften this highlight, we're just going to go, it's like in the middle of your black region here. And it doesn't even come like all the way over. I'm going to get a little more white here. And it's got this weird little curvy bit here. And then it goes, and like pretty much goes around the whole eye. But it gets much more faint down here where I'm at on this lower right side, because it's not getting as much of the light. So you're not getting as much of that highlight. And then he has this weird little line right here. It's like got a little double line. If you have a really fine brush, this is a good place for it. I'm just making do with what I have right now. So it's got like a little double line there. So yeah, I would probably come back in with mine with a finer brush and shape that up a little bit. Do I have a finer brush? I'm not going to look for the finer brush right now. All my brushes are over here, but... And I can go on. I'm going to fix that orange around there too. As long as you're really careful, it won't touch where you don't want it to. I'm going to go on because that orange is really bothering me. Sometimes things just bother me like that. And also, here's a little trick. If you keep moving when you're going and buy a color that's wet, it'll push the paint out of the way and actually won't mix. So as long as you keep moving, your paint won't mix. And it'll make a nice line around there. And then I'll shape that up a little bit more. And I may have to do it a couple of times because that orange is still coming through a little bit. You can just blend it in. Right now I'm just waiting for that pupil to dry so we can do that highlight and then we'll be done. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Any problems that you're having, use me while you got me. And if you like doing these paintings, I am going to do another one on November 11th. That's a Wednesday, but it'll be at 7 o'clock again. And we're going to be doing a fall tree in the wind. It's got really pretty colors. Probably will not be as tedious as this owl eye. So yeah, I covered up my orange there. Okay, doing the highlights on the eye. So again, this is a good place to have a smaller brush. I'm just going to make do with what I have. You want to make sure that if you went back with your orange paint, you want to make sure that it's dry before you do any highlights on your eye, or else you're going to end up with a weird peachy colored eye, and it'll be weird and off-putting because it'll be flesh colored. So that'll be weird. So yeah, the orange is dry. He's got a little bit of a highlight over here where all this highlight's happening. This little line that follows his eye like that. And then our nice big glob. We get to do a big globby glob right here. If you get black in this, because my black is not dry yet. I can tell it's still shiny. Thick paint. If you keep putting thick paint, don't smear it. If you smear it, it will get more muddy. So the trick with wet on wet is not to smear. I'm gonna do a big globby here. I'll wipe my brush because I know I've got black on it from that. And I'm moving that white paint around because I put it on there really thick. And that's another good trick. If you're working with wet paints, put the top one on really thick, and then you can work with the paint that's on top of that color without actually mixing them. See, I got a little bit of black. That means I'm gonna have to put some more white here. Or, if you're afraid of that, or you don't want it thick, you can just wait for it to dry and then come back and put more on top. So that's another little thing you can do. But sometimes you just don't have time for that. So I'm just going to put more on top of here. And it's not a little perfect circle. This one, he's got a little off piece. Like a little tadpole almost. Gives him a little character. I could have told y'all to use some yellow. And some yellow mixed with the orange around the eye would have been a nice little iris. Which you could have. I just chose to do the orange because I thought it was a nice, just a really nice, bright, stark color. Really popped. And if you're like me, you're about done. Apart from the little things I'm going to go back and touch up with a smaller brush. So I would love to see y'all's paintings when you're done. Here, let me zoom out this far. Here, let me just pick it up. See how far back. Okay. So there's our done owl. And then I'm going to shape him up a little bit. I got a little square, I guess you'll call it. I don't know. But hopefully you're pretty happy with yours. This is a little trickier painting. You would think it would be easier with the 3 colors, but it's just less forgiving that way. So, you know, if you need any help with yours or anything like that, just message me. Like I said, I would love to see your paintings. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and for joining. And I had fun painting with y'all. I just miss hearing voices. It's so lonely. But we'll be back with another painting in a couple of weeks because I'm doing one in studio next week with a craft workshop. Which, if you are local, I'm doing fabric pumpkins on Thursday. We're doing craft fabric pumpkins with upholstery fabric. They're going to be really, really pretty. And then we're going to do, I'm going to do a kids painting session on Saturday for any kids that are interested. So, and that'll be the tree. That'll be the online one for the following week. So, if you want to do email notifications, just send me your email and I'll add you to the mailing list. I try to send one the first of the month with all of the scheduled workshops and online sessions and all that fun stuff. So be sure to sign up for anything that you're interested in, because if I don't have anybody interested, I just cancel it and move on. So I hope y'all enjoyed doing the owl painting and gave you a little bit of an appreciation for using black and white paints. There's something quite beautiful about it and more versatile than you think it's going to be. So I hope y'all had fun with that. And I look forward to painting with y'all again tonight. And I want to see those pictures. So send them to me when you get yours the way you want it to. So have a good night. Bye, everybody.